fun, right?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for coming, especially on this kind of a crazy rainy evening. Has it stopped raining, hopefully?
Let's start fun. Let's start fun. Do you shop at Gucci?
I have recently, yes, definitely, and I bought a beautiful, actually it was a present, gorgeous handbag, and I wear it all the time. In fact, I have it with me. My daughter stole it right now. Yes.
When you take your credit card out, do the clerks freak out? Like, do they see
oh my gosh.
Gucci?
I have a great story. It's incredible that you actually asked me that. It was in Geneva, and we were there looking around, and I chose this handbag, and my boyfriend went back to pay for it. And one thing, oh yes, and then the lady came to me and she says, "Will you please fill up this form, just so we have an address for you and everything." And so I wrote Patricia Gucci, address. And then she goes, no, not the Gucci store. Could you please put your last name? I said, well, it is. She flipped out. She goes, oh my goodness, I can't believe it. This is your store. You can do whatever you want here. I said, no. Anyway, so that was my little moment. It was literally 3 months ago it happened. It was quite amusing.
I guess this is a question everybody's going to want to know the answer to. So how many pairs of Gucci shoes do you have?
Gosh, I mean, they're old shoes. No, not many.
Not many?
No.
I guess this was mine. What's your favorite vintage bag?
My favorite vintage bag?
Yeah.
Well, I had some incredible ones, and unfortunately, they were stolen in an apartment I owned in London, and that was that.
Oh, my God.
So it was, yeah.
How old were the bags?
They were beautiful bags. My mother gave them to me. There was the bamboo, the famous bamboo, and just beautiful bags. I can't remember all of them, but it was a shock.
The taste is always so exquisite.
Yes.
With the Gucci bags. I mean, the Gucci everything, but the bags are just, the taste level is just extraordinary. Every detail.
It is. It's always made beautifully, and fortunately, they keep on always getting inspired by the old models that we used to have, and so now they've adapted them into different versions, and it's exciting. It's always exciting to see.
When did the bamboo handle start?
The bamboo handle started, I think, in the 1950s. Yeah.
Wow.
Yes.
That's about as far back as it goes.
Yes, absolutely.
Tell, for people who don't know, and for people who think Gucci, is basically suits and shoes and loafers and bags. What did Gucci sell originally in Florence and then Rome in the 50s?
Originally, in the 50s, it was all leather. I mean, mostly suitcases, as you said, and bags and little wallets and homeware, too, little things that you would have in a home, like boxes, leather boxes. And basically, the actual clothes started in the 60s, and they were combined with the bags. It was about having a beautiful suede coat with the buckle that matched the handbag. So it wasn't really fashion as we know it until much later. Actually, really, when I came into the business in the early 80s, and in Milano, they hired a famous Milanese designer called Luciano Soprani, and he created an actual collection. So it was a lot of fun. When I joined Gucci, at least I had something more concrete to work with that was closer to my generation. And there you go. And I used to do all the fashion shows in America, and give them a little younger spin, which my father was happy to see. Of course, he watched from the sidelines to make sure I didn't mess up, but he gave me free rein after a while, and that was really fun.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's like, with Gucci starting out as in bags, right, in luggage, where was everybody going? In other words, an entire store, but when you think about it, nobody was taking planes then yet. Everybody was traveling by ship.
It was an incredible era, an era that a lot of people will not remember. But it was one of those times when you used to travel by car or train, and it was luxurious, and it was, the porters respected your luggage. I mean, it was just another time, and nowadays we can forget about it. You can hardly, a Samsonite barely gets to the other side without being damaged. So those were different times, and women dressed always beautifully, even if they went to the store or they went wherever they went. There was a timeless elegance for everybody from all walks of life. And that showed also, I think, in how Gucci was able, you know, to be embraced in Europe and who wore it.
What did that original luggage look like? I mean, how was it designed?
It was pigskin. It was thick, gorgeous leather. I still have a few pieces, and you could pretty much throw them around anywhere. I mean, they were quite solid, but they were elegant and gorgeous big buckles. And then there was canvas with a leather trim. So there was all sorts of things like that.
Yeah, the great detail. I mean, just gorgeous. You know, when your mom goes to work in the Rome store, what year is that?
That was in 1957, yes. She was a beautiful young woman and very innocent and wide-eyed, and couldn't believe that she had never even heard of Gucci, actually. And she was introduced to this opportunity by her fiancé at the time, and who knew somebody there. And that's how she walked in and started this job on the shop and wherever she was doing what she was doing.
Where was it located in Rome?
Via Condotti. Ooh. Yes. The famous Via Condotti, but it was in another area than where it is now. I can't remember the exact number, but it was further up. So. What
did she tell you? What her first impressions were when she walked in there? Was it like walking into another world?
Yes, of course it was.
Tell me about it.
Well, her eyes, she couldn't believe it. It was just the smells, the clientele, the luxury. It was just quite another world, of course, and so she was very enchanted, and her, you know, her stomach was full of butterflies, but she loved it. She immediately, you know, wanted to be there and understood the importance of what she was going to do.
And at what point does she meet Aldo?
Well, she met Aldo. He would, you know, fly in and out of the shop every 5 minutes, you know, whenever he was there, or once a month if he happened to be away. And he would say hello to everybody. I mean, it was a small place in those days. It wasn't a huge place like it is now. And of course, you know, he was one of those people that he walked in and there was not one thing he didn't notice. You know, he was very observant and had high levels of expectation, of perfection. Everything had to be just so. But then he walked in and he saw my mother, and for some reason he was like, whoa. I mean, he always was a man for the pretty women. He was a big womanizer, my father. It was not something, but there was something about my mama that I think struck him in a way. The way he caressed when he first met her. My mother would say, mi carezzava. He gave me this little caress, and he'd go, ciao Nina. Oh Nina, che tu fai? You know, Tuscan. And so, you know, my mother, of course, was like, oh my God, don't, you know, didn't want to be singled out, of course, and but he was always respectful for, you know, a good year. But he always, with everyone else, he could be even more like this, and with her, he had this little more gentle way, and it was very sweet. So,
photos of your mom, she's absolutely beautiful. I mean, there's just she's a movie actress, pretty, yes. Really.
Oh, and if you tell her that now, she looks at you like, are you crazy? Be quiet! Don't you? You know, she gets angry. Literally, my daughter can you know.
Why do you think that is?
For some reason, I don't know what it is. She doesn't think of herself as a beauty, and as far as I'm concerned, she's really a beauty still. And compared even to a lot of people of her age, she's because she also has an inner innocence, and she's a clean living person. You know, she's always not one of those women that have been around the block kind of thing, and so she has always maintained a certain way of being, and I think that shows. She's very sweet, very gracious, very modest, and yeah.
You know, as far as Aldo making advances, you know, in today's day and age, it would be sort of taking advantage. Here's the owner of the store, and he's married, and, you know, he's making advances. But there's something special going on between them. It's almost not that, right? There's almost a chemistry. Considering how long they were together. In the beginning,
my mother, you know, for her, of course, he's the boss, number one. He's this incredible, suave, sophisticated man. My father always looked much younger than his age, even though there was a 30-year difference. And he, you know, it was never even entered her mind that there could ever be a situation between them. She was, you know, very conservative, from the old school. She had a very strict upbringing. Her father was a bit of a nightmare, and her brother was an even more of a nightmare. And very machismo, very masculine sort of. She would have to always behave in a certain way and go home at a certain time, dress in a certain way. There was absolutely very, and then a boyfriend was very jealous and possessive, wouldn't even let her wear lipstick. So, there was, in her mind, she was going like, do. But my father, kept on pushing the envelope a little bit more with her, and eventually, he asked to see her away from the shop after about a year or so, when I think she became his secretary then. Actually, no, what am I talking about? She became his secretary. His secretary left, and he asked her, because he knew she had some stenography skills, and she goes, believe me, I was no good as a secretary, but for some reason he wanted me to be his secretary. So she was there, and then he kept on looking at her, and my mother said, it was impossible to concentrate, and I would blush, and then after a while he started giving me these little presents, and these little presents were things I couldn't take home and justify, They were beautiful little things I wouldn't possibly afford, and I would refuse them, and he would not hear of it, and I would just put them in a little cupboard in the office, not even open them practically.
This is your mother talking?
Yes, and that's what she would do, and so it was a prolonged process, but him constantly, pushing and then of course he'd be traveling, so time would go in, and eventually he made himself very much forward. He came very much more forward and insisted that they meet, but with a government. Eventually, first alone, and that was, my mother nearly had a heart attack at the whole prospect of meeting him alone. She said she was trembling and sweating. It was just a really tough thing for her to even consider. God forbid anyone would catch them. And then eventually, to make her happier and to calm her down, he brought a chaperone, and they would go out for dinners, and then it was just this process went on for a while. Yes.
And Patricia, it's fascinating to me. If this isn't a conquest for him, is it? It's not like.
Well, a little bit, I'm sure. My father had. Yes, he was somebody that he wasn't used to anyone saying no. In any department, in anything in life, up until the very last few years of his life. That's how he got where he got, that's what he did. I mean, not that he, and with my mother, though, he did see something special, but yet, of course, he wanted to conquer. He was not going to, and she kept on pushing him away. I mean, he had never had that, because most women would throw themselves at him. Say, of course,
What turned the tide? What turned the tide? What was the change?
Well, I think my mother, says definitely I mean, of course, she was flattered, but the moment she received one of those love letters from him, when he was off on a long trip in America, and this envelope arrives on the desk, and she opens it up, and she would literally was, oh my God, thinking there was maybe someone looking. The fear of opening and reading this letter, she knew was something, and so she put the letters in her shirt and waited. She was on the bus to go home, and then she'd open them up and read them, and just would go, oh my goodness, this, first of all, incredible, beautiful.
Don't tell anybody yet. We're going to get to that.
But yeah, it was. She's never felt anyone. No one had ever talked to her that way. No one had ever made her feel that way. No one. I mean, for any woman reading having those letters sent would feel $1 million. And my mother, that was the turning point. That was what made her fall in love.
The letters.
Yeah, definitely.
Now, in 1962, Aldo moves your mother to London. Why?
Well, me. No, I was in her tummy. And yes, it was a horrendous thing for her to go through that. She was 5 months pregnant, and at that point she had to go because she was starting to show. And she had a companion, you say in Italian, una governante, it's like a companion lady who, would live with you and sort of, I don't know how I've never been able to think of how to translate that word, because it doesn't ever sound right translated in English. But it's somebody that is with you as a maid, housekeeper-y kind of thing. Anyway, this woman was with her for quite a few years before, when my father would take my mother to America, and she would accompany my mother, and then they had a trip in New York that they got snowed in at one point, and I think this woman never wanted to go somewhere outside of Rome again. So when my mother told her, I'm going to London, literally the night before, she disappeared and left a note saying, I can't come. And my mother was, oh my God, I'm alone. I am alone going to a foreign country, don't speak the language, pregnant, not married. And my father, of course, made sure everything was there, prepared for her, but it was not, you know, she felt alone. And
it's terrifying.
It was terrifying. This is the 60s. It was not, you know, now. So that was one of the worst times. Well, there's many worse times. She says, oh, but that was one of the worst. Oh, but no, that was one of the worst times. But I can tell you that was one of them. And so there you go. She arrives in London, and she's in an apartment. Unfortunately, my father had organized it very well, as he always did. And there was my godfather there who was to help her through that process.
And you're very, very young in London.
Yes.
But you start to remember, I assume your first memories are in Windsor, when you moved to Windsor?
And yes, I was, what was I? 6. Something like that, yes.
And well,
I remember some things even way before in Hendon. When we were in Hendon, my mother put me in this horrible school, but anyway, that's another story. Horrible.
What would life in England be without a horrible school, right?
Oh, she was an ogre.
Really?
Ogre. This was a teacher from hell. She was the principal of a very small school, and of course, me, at that time, I didn't realize it, but I think I was her prize little, because I was Gucci, and my mother would always pay everybody to take care. And so she had me, and she kept me right there with her. And she was like, it was horrible, actually. My mother left me once with her for 2 months while she went off to do whatever she had to do. And I had to sleep in the same room with this old, mean English lady. Wow. Yes, I know I was only 5, so for me it was really horrible.
Oh yeah, I was going to ask you. I mean, you're in London. You don't see your father that often, right? Your mom, you know, is dealing with what she has to deal with. What is young life in England like for you at this period?
It was great, actually.
Really?
Yeah, when after London, you know, and I also had this wonderful nanny, Maureen, who was my mother's angel, as she says, but she was my angel too, because my mother was not always a present, you know, in so many ways with me, and she couldn't cope with many things. And so Maureen was the one who, obviously, since I was 2.5, 3, introduced me to reading, books, culture. We used to go to museums. She was just my like a mentor. I mean, not a mentor, but she just made me feel that everything was okay. I felt very secure with her around, and she taught me so much.
So looking back, is it a blessing not to have parents telling you what to do all day? Or, I mean, did you have freedom, or did you miss someone sort of outlining?
No, it was nothing like that. It was, no, I had a very, very schedule, you know, and then I went to a boarding school. It was never about freedom. Later on, it became about freedom when I was a teenager. That's another thing. No, it was all. I was a very good girl. I was such a good little girl. Didn't rock any boats till much later.
You know, while all this is going on, I want to switch back to Gucci. While all this is happening, what is Aldo doing? He's transforming the company, isn't he?
Yes.
What is he doing?
He's just being a tornado and running around the world and creating this incredible brand that, you know, he did. Non-stop. No one could keep up with him. He had 1,000,000,001 ideas, and he implemented all of them brilliantly. And wherever he decided to open a shop was a brilliant, insightful move, which, you know, as we know, Worth Avenue, Rodeo Drive, these are all places that were all thanks to Aldo Gucci.
And Palm Beach, I mean, this is the early 60s, right?
Yes, and no one was there, really.
Right.
Yeah.
And something happens, though. Does he meet the Kennedys there?
Oh, gosh, I don't know. He met everybody. He did meet.
But he creates a bag specifically for Jackie, doesn't he?
Jackie Kennedy in Rome was a very good client.
In Rome.
So, yes. And, you know, there was a bag that she wore, which of course launched like 1,000 ships. Yeah. So that was Jackie Kennedy, and then Grace Kelly with her scarf, and all sorts of that's why they all used to come to Rome. But my father said, you know, okay, that's lovely, that's fabulous, very fortunate, and it was, you know, Gucci had already established itself in so many ways. But my father said, we have to go to America, and that's why, you know, New York, when he landed there, he wanted to conquer America, and he did. But before that, already movie stars were wearing Gucci, and so it was a lovely
what was the most signature garment back then? Is it the scarf? in the 60s for Gucci?
Oh, I think the loafer was huge, the handbags, the bamboo and the Jackie, and all these very, very famous that they still carry on into the brand now.
Well, part of the genius is that whenever a celebrity is photographed, they seem to be photographed carrying a Gucci bag or something so that it's making the media. I mean, he seemed to have this innate sense of how to get this free aspect of marketing or get as much marketing as possible, or else these people were just, I mean, these movie stars were just carrying those bags trying to show them off, but it worked well for the company in terms of publicity.
It was wonderful, of course. I mean, they wouldn't have bought it if they didn't think there was an incredible brand, you know, and everybody was flocking to Gucci in those days. There was nothing better. There was nothing like it. You know, it was the ultimate prestigious thing to wear, and but having the celebrities endorse it was obviously a crowning PR move of every kind.
Did your mom tell you that she gave, I mean, through these years, does your mom give your dad really good business advice?
It wasn't business. I think she gave him life advice.
How so?
The only time she gave him a business advice, but it was for her own personal goal to get my godfather to have a position in California, which was his dream, was when my father was very adamant of opening up first in San Francisco in the West Coast. And my mother was going, no, Aldo, I don't think San Francisco's a good idea. You know, it's, you know, all those hippies. I don't think that's a good idea. I think you want to go to Beverly Hills. And he said, what do you mean? There's no one walking the streets. There's nothing. There was only Giorgio or Fred Hayman. And but he then suddenly saw the light. She goes, but look at all the movie stars. They're all here. They would be wearing Gucci. And that was a little nudge she gave him. And when he received the key to the city, he acknowledged my mother for that.
You know, if you close your eyes, what exact moment did you learn that your parents weren't married?
I had 9 years old.
When you were 9?
Yes. My mother plonked me on her bed one day, one of the few times she actually sort of decided to talk to me, you know, in a very direct way. You know, it's usually, oh, come on, it's time for dinner, it's time for this. But this was like, Patricia, I have to talk to you. And she said, you know, I have to tell you, you know, we're moving to Rome. I'm like, what? I love my life in England. I'm in boarding school. I have my best friend. You know, I was a little English schoolgirl. I was so happy to be in England. And then, of course, my mother, without even asking if it was okay, decides to move to Rome.
Why?
But she goes, the reason...
Why Rome? Why moving back?
Well, she couldn't stay another day in England. You know, after being alone, she felt so isolated. You know, she's a real Roman, you know. Una Romana. She needs to be with her friends and do her thing and her language and her food. And, you know, England was dreary in the 70s. It was not like it is now. So London and that area, you know. But basically, the more important, also another revelation of that moment was that I want you to know that you have 3 half-brothers. And I was, whoa, what do you mean I have 3 half-brothers? She goes, yes, your father is married. And I thought she was married to my father. So it was kind of, but I wasn't, oh my God, this is terrible, what am I going to do? No, it was, oh, wonderful, I'm going to have an extended family. I was a bit like my father in that I never, you know, said my mother was like, oh no, this is not a good thing, you don't understand, they're not very happy that you're around. I'm like, whatever, you know, in English, not in American. But no, it was a huge revelation. And I embraced it and went to Rome and subsequently went to meet them.
After infatuation, what did your father see in your mother?
Sorry?
After the infatuation, what is it?
Everything.
What does he see? The essence?
Her modesty, her innocence, her loyalty, her beauty all the time. The fact that she didn't think she was beautiful. The fact that she was a very simple person, you know, in a way, you know, she never demanded things. She demanded his time. It wasn't, you know, of course she wanted security. I mean, you know, she was always thinking, my goodness, what's going to happen to us? God forbid, you know, Aldo dies, blah, blah, blah. But she was also somebody that he would go home after, you know, going around the world and completely exhausted and run down, because traveling in those days was a lot more tedious than not tedious, but it was much, you know, more grueling in some ways. And he would come home wiped out, and she would receive him with a big plate of spaghetti, a hot bath, and you know, just give him that TLC that he needed. And even if she nagged and which she, of course, was waiting, you know, for a month to tell him everything she wanted to tell him, and I need to do this, Aldo, and I need to. But he was happy even to hear that chatter, because it was just a relief from the rest. You know, it was therapeutic. So it was an interesting. But I didn't understand it. I was looking at them, going, "What is, you know, what's going on here? How can my father walk in and, you know?" But he was happy with my mother, and she could do no wrong.
You know, when you think back, did you have a mother back then?
No.
You didn't?
No, I had a mother who made sure I was fed. I looked always good, because that was very important for her. You know, I always had to have my hair done and my little dresses and everything. Friends of mine remember that. I was like, really? That was not so important to me. But, oh, we looked at you, Patricia, you were impeccable all the time. And I said, okay. So she made sure that was but she wasn't able to, like I with my daughters, we sit there and we talk about everything, you know, maybe too much. And it wasn't that kind of thing. So I never had anyone I could talk to and express anything. And I just was always, that's why I was always a very good girl. I didn't rock any boats. I just read my books, played with my friends.
So when your
Until
father,
I met boys.
That is.
No, I mean,
I wish I could can that laugh. That's great.
Well, that was Rome. Yes.
When your father leaves the house, right? And he's there, you know, what, every 4 weeks or so?
More or less.
More or less. Okay. So he leaves. Do you notice that your mother deflates? That your mother pulls away from you? In other words, does your mother? Are there other anxieties that your mother is dealing with that are tough for you?
Well, when my father would walk through the door, it would be like, Patricia, go to your room, boom, daddy, boom, and that's it. And then, you know, obviously we're around at meal times. When he'd leave, yes, she would be like, oh, he's gone, you know, and she would withdraw into her world again and be upset, you know, yeah. It wasn't, she couldn't just sit down and talk to me about, look, you know, your father, there was none of that. So I just wanted, you know.
It's difficult for you
to just get used to it.
Difficult for you to find her emotionally, too.
Yes, well, she discovered yoga. She met this incredible man, Siri Nandi, who was a guru and who actually helped her a lot find some balance and peace and deal with whatever situation she was dealing with in her mind. And on the other hand, though, she got a bit too much in that department, and sometimes she would do transcendental yoga and, you know, pranayama, and I would not see her forever. She would literally, she said, Patricia, I went to another. I said, but she goes, once I got really scared, you know. I said, I'm sure you did, you know, because she lost her dimension then. And my father would get frustrated about that when he would come home. She'd be talking to him about all these books she was reading. Aldo, you know this, and Aldo, and he was like, I know all this stuff already. I live it. You know, I don't have to read these books. So that was the interesting combination between them. And he wanted her attention, but she found this other source of life, which gave her, you know, it was her thing. It was her baby. So I think it was one of the first time my mother started feeling a sense of empowerment.
You know, from a child's perspective, as an eyewitness, is a mistress's life, is it enviable? Is it difficult? I mean, forget about the money. You know, what she was well taken care of, you guys were well taken care of. But emotionally, as an eyewitness, when you're watching what's happening, is it something that's enviable, or is it something that's very, very difficult?
Those were different days, and nowadays it's still difficult. There's no question. Being a mistress, I think, is not ever good for anybody. But in those days, you know, my mother was. It was from those first days that it embedded in her this sense of anxiety, this feeling of not being happy with who she was and the position she was in. She never was ever able to accept that. The life, even though she went through what she went through it, but it was always a conflict, and she was never happy, and, you know, she didn't have the tools sometimes. So being a mistress in those days was because it was so difficult because of the social situation in Italy. You know, Italy is a tough place, you know, in some ways. They gossip a lot.
Food is good.
Food is amazing and everything like that, but there's a certain society, and they're not kind. And then you have, you know, in those days it was illegal, and so she always felt very self-conscious about everything all the time. Yeah.
one of the most amazing parts of your story, I think, is when you decide a few years ago, to write about all of this, that your mother shares your father's love letters with you. How many love letters were there?
About 20 plus, and then telegrams and bits and pieces.
What did you think, when you went off privately to read these, you were basically experiencing what your mother experienced. I mean, you were hearing the same emotion coming off that letter that your mother felt. What did you think?
For me, it was a revelation as to the amount of passion my father had in those words. My father comes from a generation where you didn't express your emotions like that, and even with, I think anyone in his family had never seen him very affectionate kind of person. And I knew, though, he loved her and all that, but when I read those letters, and forget about the fact that the most incredible love letters and the poetry that comes from his words, you truly get lifted into just his love for her. It was just knowing my father could talk that way and say those things, and it was quite a revelation. And I always knew he was a great writer, but that was really amazing to me.
As his daughter.
And that my mother never read them again. When she read them the first time, she put them away, and 50 years later, gave them to me, and still wouldn't read them with me.
When she gave them to you, were they in a box, a special box?
No, in a pouch.
Pouch.
A Gucci pouch. I'm sorry to say it was. It sounds like I'm kind of cringing about it, but it's because, it sounds like, well, let's put it in a Gucci pouch, right? No, but those letters, yes, she wouldn't read them with me. I said, come on, Mama, you've got to read these. No, I can't read them. They bring too much emotion back, which I can maybe understand.
As a little girl, this is a question I wanted to ask you. When your father comes, he spends time with your mom, but he spends time with you. What was special for you about those visits? What did he bring you? Did he bring you things? How did he indulge you?
Whenever he could, it was amazing, because this man who, I thought he was bigger than life, he actually took the time and says, we're going to do a little shopping, and he would take me into this little, especially in Palm Beach, he had a little more time, and he would take me and he would sit there patiently while I tried on all these little outfits. What do you think about this, Daddy? What do you think about, that kind of thing. Those are things that Aldo Gucci, you don't see him doing, that was one. And then he would love to take me out to a little bar, a bar after work, and we'd have cocktails. I have Shirley Temple, he'd have his Canadian club, and introduce me to, so in some ways, as a little girl, I was always like a young lady. I was never a little girl. I was never, that typical. I was always in a grown-up world. And he was very proud of me, and he loved to show me off to everybody. It was never, I know they're saying, I was a secret. I was a secret, when I was a little baby. But I was a secret with my father from, 5, as soon as I could walk and talk.
Seeing pictures of your dad, it's just extraordinary how he, his dress is just,
impeccable.
From a girl's perspective, what blows your mind? Is it the knot in his tie? Is it the kerchief? In other words, what is it, when you think back on your dad, what was extraordinary about his look? The silhouette, or the way he put himself together? He
had his uniform. It was his tailor-made suits with, what do you call it? Men, you got to help me out here, with the split,
vent?
The vents, the little flaps, double-breasted. Ties, Gucci mostly, and his little pochette and his shoes. I mean, I have his suits, and I treasure them. I don't know what to do with them. I have them. It's just it was my father's look. It was always groomed. I mean, he comes also from that school where you didn't go out without a tie and without obviously as time went on, you didn't wear a hat anymore, but that's the generation. So.
I have 2 last questions for you before we turn to questions, and I'm sure everybody's got lots of questions. 2 last ones. Do you think your father wanted a girl? In other words?
Yes, big time.
Okay.
They thought I was a boy. They thought I was a boy, and they would have called me Alexander. Yeah, and And then I was a girl. And
he had three sons in Rome,
yes,
right?
Exactly.
So he was waiting for a girl,
well,
really.
Because of the 3 sons, he thought I was going to be another one, but he was very happy. And the same goes with I had my daughters. Oh, God, especially after what happened with his sons. God forbid, Victoria, who was in my stomach when he was very ill last month of his life, and I told him, Daddy, I've got a... He goes, good, because if it was a boy, I wouldn't want to know about it. But yes, he had a special feeling for girls. You know, my daughter, my 3-year-old too, he loved her to bits. Yeah.
Okay, here's my last one. Here's people. It's not going to be. It's not scandalous. Nothing big. No rabbit out of the hat. What Gucci gift that your father gave you do you still have and treasure?
A signet ring. I don't wear it now because it's a bit small.
What does it look like?
It's a gold signet ring with the Gucci arms, which is not really Gucci arms because, you know, we're not pedigree like you. And but it was the coat of arms, and he had it made for me, and that was why it was so important for me. That little ring was just so special, and he gave me lots of things. I mean, this watch is another one. It's a Gucci vintage. I love it because of the simplicity of it, and you don't see it anymore anywhere.
Beautiful.
Oh, gosh, there's lots of little things. But that ring, which I actually lost for 2 years, and it popped up out of nowhere on a carpet, has a great significance.
Oh, one more thing. Most people are under the assumption that when you go into a Gucci store, you can take everything out. You can get everything for free. Is that true?
I didn't remember that until I started talking to friends of mine, and my friend Andrea goes, "You B word. You don't realize, but we used to go into these shops and you'd go, okay, I think I like that. And I think I'll take one of those. And I don't remember at all. Because I didn't go and take a crocodile bag or something. It was just like a little bits and bobs. But I was able to do so, yes. And later on, when I was working at Gucci, I could go in and sign, take something with me. I was lucky.
One last one. Do you think of yourself as British or Italian? Because you go back and forth between the two accents,
that's
right?
One of those, yeah, I don't know. What do you think? There's a bit of everything.
Britalian.
Yeah?
You're
you
Britalian.
think I'm Italian? A Britalian,
Yeah.
exactly.
Britalian.
I'm a Britalian.
Hail Britalia.
Because with Italians, with Italians, after a while, I don't have a lot of patience about certain things. And with English, you know, there's certain things that I think that are limited because they don't have the flair of food and this and that and the other. So I wear both with pride of my raising or whatever, my blood and my education. Yeah, but I'm punctual, unlike an Italian.
We have time for questions?
Yeah, we have time for 1 or 2 questions. If you want to raise your hand, I'll bring you a mic.
Don't be shy. Ask the question you've always wanted to ask.
Oh gosh.
Okay, you said that there was something that happened with Aldo's sons. Could you talk about what your relationship was like with them?
Well, I mean, up until, let's say, the last few years of my father's life, where things, you know, became quite horrible for him, we were very cordial. It was actually, when I first met my half-brothers, and my father organized this meeting in the factory in Scandicci, and I was with my father in a room, and all 3 of them walked in one after another, and especially one of them actually embraced me and called me his little sister, which at the time I thought, oh, how sweet, but anyway, yes. It was always very, you know, nice. They were very nice to me, you know. It's just that later on in life, what they did to their father, you know, it was very hard for me to be able to sit in the same room with them and look at them so kindly.
Questions?
I thought Gucci began as a saddlery in the relationship with the horse. Is that a myth?
Yes, it's a myth.
Completely. So it began as a fashion. It immediately stepped into fashion.
No.
Objects and.
No. Well, basically, originally the family were making straw hats, and that went, unfortunately, well, not fortunately, actually it was fortunate. It went kaput as a business, and so my grandfather was forced to go find work in London, and he went to the Savoy, and he became a porter there. And by being there and seeing the Savoy was the place in London for all the richest and the aristocratic people all came with their beautiful luggage and fineries, and he you know, watched everything, and because being a Florentine too, he had a certain knowledge of what was beautiful and what was not, and how things were made also, I think. He decided to go back to Florence and learn more about the world of leather, and he then from there on built his little workshop and opened his boutique in Florence and created the most exquisite leather goods. And there you go.
One for me. Were you angry when the Spice Girls had that song that sort of mocked the Gucci girl?
No. But there's so, you know, I have to say, I think there's no brand that has more songs written about than Gucci. I mean, I remember when I went to Switzerland to our school, and well, actually, you know, Halston, Gucci, Fiorucci, Ecco. So I walked in, and also we had a Pucci there. We had all sorts of things. So yeah, it's kind of, Gucci was always a name that's been in, because it rhymes well, you know. So rap songs too.
Thank you. I thought your book was amazing, gorgeous, such a wonderful love story.
I know who you are. I've seen you.
What I wanted to ask you about the book, I mean, it's fantastic, and what struck me most was it's such an enduring love story. And what I would be fascinated to know is what does Bruna, your mother, think about it as she read the book from cover to cover? Because it's such a testament to
not
love.
cover to cover, no. I've had to give her snippets of things, and yeah, it's hard for her. It's very hard. She's embraced it somewhat because she knows how important it is to me, and I've given her the same, let's say, spiel, if you want to call it, saying this is really, it's a tribute to Papa. We owe this to him. His legacy was swept under the rug in such a horrible way. I mean, we all, every time, you know, we read something in the paper, it was as if he never existed. And we are everything thanks to him. And we have to do this, Mama, and you have to support me somehow, and you have to give me as much insight because I have no clue about a lot of things with you. So it's always been the same talk to her I've had to do to make her always aware and why I'm doing this. Of course, she's just going, oh my God, I can't believe this. Here I am all my life. I've been a little, oh, did you hiding this? Like I said, Mama, all your life you've been so frustrated that no one understood you. Well, now they do.
Time for one more? Okay. You're it.
This is quite a personal question, so you definitely don't have to give an answer. But I'm just intrigued because both my mother and sister have the name Patricia, and it's not a family name for us. What's the significance, if any, of your parents choosing that?
You haven't read the book, so.
But you can buy it, and there's a signed
no,
copy of it.
That's in the book. So my mother, when she was in hospital, you know, she suffered a lot, obviously having me for some reason, and then I came out bawling and screaming, and because I was so angry, obviously being in her tummy, feeling all this insanity going on with where I was going, and so, you know, I really believe that babies feel everything. So basically, she had next to her another lovely lady who had this baby who was quiet and so sweet and always so quiet. She goes, oh, I used to look at that baby, never cried. So, on all arms and legs and everything like that. And there was this, and then my mother was suffering a lot after the birth. So she had this lovely, lovely nurse, and her name was Patricia. And she was like her angel. And so she says, well, I'm calling you Patricia. Maybe it'll rub off.
And now you know. Patricia Gucci.
Thank you for coming.